Okay, yeah. Talking about tech and not knowing how to use it, right? So, um, what is tokenization? Basically, tokenization, we have to understand it as a digitization opportunity, right? So nowadays, we're talking a lot about real estate going on chain, equity going on chain, debt, and whatnot. So here, it's all about providing infrastructure. How are we going to help companies or players or institutional or banks being able to onboard their assets, right? So understanding that right now the world is still not online fully, there's a lot of problems that we have to solve. And if we understand that maybe half of the assets now transact on chain, or not on chain, sorry, digital, for example, shares on NASDAQ, they've been digitized for years. Maybe like 1% of that is being tokenized, right? So tokenization is the evolution of the digitization phase. Just because everything transacts on chain, everything becomes public. But still, we have to onboard those assets, especially the ones that are not even online. So a lot of real estate, there's not online. The price aggregators, it's a problem. Public registries, it's a problem because they're not transparent, they're not digital. So all of these situations, we need to understand how are we going to provide a solution for that. So obviously, Chainlink, famous for its oracles, data feeds, accuracy, precision. I'm not going to go too much into detail as to why is that, because I guess all of you already know that Chainlink and the oracles is the main player, right? So it's all about providing accuracy, price points, real-time accuracy, and that's in markets, that's super important because a single deviation for, I don't know, in a transaction can mean actually millions. Imagine that in NASDAQ, something happens and the valuation of the stock just fails. That's a huge issue. So obviously, in chain, we need to provide them also with that accuracy always. And then we have different chains, and then we have different assets. So I am going to talk about what I believe it's one of my favorites right now. So if we understand that the Oracle is providing pinpoint accuracy, then we have to understand where is the trust foundation, right? Where does that rely? And right now, especially after 2021 and some of the situations that happened, we were able to, I'm not part of Chainlink, but Chainlink developed something that it's kind of like, where is the accuracy of the trust? And it goes through the proof of reserves. So how can we apply the technology of proof of reserves to real world assets? That's the question, or RWA, which is now the acronym that everybody's using. And I just put up a use case right here, very simple, but to understand that everything that we bring digital, when it's not digitized since the inception, so a real world asset will never be born digital, we have to onboard them and digitize that fact. So we have to ask ourselves, where is the trust foundation? So that's where we come with a proof of reserves. So you have a house, let's pretend that it's 100K. And who says it's 100K? I say it's 100K, the issuer says it's 100K, or the seller says it's 100K. So the trust is all about belief, right? Like, who do I believe about the right momentum or the right price? But let's say that you do have an auditor or you have a public registry. Right now in some countries, they're developing digitized real-world public registries for real-world assets such as real estate. If you bring that to the chain, not actually to your value chain, then that becomes the foundation for your trust, the proof of reserves. Because you do have a data point that establishes the real value of the house that is verified by the third party, and then you can connect to that verified party and then say, like, every 3 months you recheck that if it's true. So it can be an auditor, it can be a registry and whatnot. So your foundation of trust is no longer saying, I say. It's the third party, right? Because in life, when we have conversations or we buy products, it's always about the third party, like the veracity, right? Where does the veracity lies? So that's why it's something super interesting for you to have on the proof of reserves for real world assets. It is verifiable that if the house is 100K, it's 100K, and then you bring your whole structure of tokenization. Because one of the biggest things that happen with the digitizing and the tokenization is that all movements are public. All your investors are public. All transactions are public. So the trust at the foundation level needs to be verifiable. And then I was lucky enough to be in ECC Paris when they launched CCIP. And for us, this is ridiculous. It's crazy. Why? Because when you are deploying a real-world asset on a chain, you are only working on that chain, right? So you have the bridgings and whatnot, but it's not efficient. So when we have to digitize an asset, it's all about efficiency, like how much efficient can we be? If you only work on a chain, then your efficiency is very low because you have to onboard all of your investors or you have to onboard all of your issuers maybe to that segregation, to just one chain. But you do need the capacities of all the ecosystem, right? So you want to build something that is accessible by absolutely everyone. Blockchain does that. But if you limit it to one chain, then you have to really understand that you have to bring them to that chain. So, for example, something that we're developing here in Bricken, because we're a tokenization platform, and it's something that we're studying, and it's why can we use, for example, Ethereum for deploying the assets, but the payments or the dividends happen in Base. Why? Because USDC is gasless. So you want to bring the security of the chain of Ethereum, but then the deployment of the payments in another chain just because it's more optimized. Or if the claim can happen in another chain, because right now in Ethereum, if you want to claim your token for a real-world asset, maybe it's 8 euros or whatnot, like that's the average. That's a lot of money. For somebody that invests 100 euros to spend 8 euros for that investment, it's a lot of money. But instead of you having to develop the infrastructure across chains, now you have CCIP. You can connect and then do your deployment and start executing functions around in other chains. And that's absolutely amazing because now you're not limited just to your chain. You can adopt series of functions that work well in other chains, and then what you provide? Value. Because in the end, what you always want to deal with the digitization phase is that you want to bring them, why? Because it's optimization is processes. It's supposed to be efficient at the fee level. So you can really start playing with these parameters when you start using CCIP. So for us, it's a work in progress that we're trying to develop. But the idea is actually that. We want to deploy our assets, maybe on Ethereum, or maybe in Avalanche, or maybe in Polygon. But the USDC level of the payment of interest or dividends on Base, because it's gasless. So how do you approach tokenization? Just talking really what we do in Bricken. The mint function, the creation of the digital asset is just the first step. Kind of like that's not even the pain. The distribution and selling is not the pain. For me, I understand that the pain comes here in the management of the digital asset. So you can onboard digital assets, yes, and maybe it's a click, yes, and maybe it's you can do it yourself. Like there's smart contract templates out there like Open Zeppelin, so you can create a digital asset. That's not a hurdle. And then you want to sell it, okay, you can distribute it manually, you can execute your smart contract, fine, and then you already have a tokenized asset. But the pain comes at the management level. Why? Because you need to understand that you have investors, you have a treasury, you have a lot of things that when you are building your project, you don't come and understand because we're short term, right? We want to execute the problem, the first one, the funding, the investment. But then we go into the management side. So for tokenization right now, it's actually booming in 2023. We more than 20 billion, I think it has been onboarded this year, which is a lot. I mean, it's macro terms is still not there because capital markets are trillions, but we're getting there. So the question will arise is, how are you going to manage that? And that's something that now the tokenization platforms such as Bricken and other players are trying to understand because the pain point is not at the beginning. The pain point comes from the continuity. And a digital asset can be a forever, right? So you have to understand how to develop that. So just a use case quickly about how we're onboarding with Bricken. And this is kind of like our proof of concept that we're going to develop. So we have a Ruby that is worth X amount that is located in a Switzerland vault. So, and it's validated by a third-party auditor. So here we bring in proof of reserves because we want to provide that the Ruby exists and that the value is true. So we're going to connect an API so the players understand that the Ruby is actually validated at a specific price in a specific moment and is located in a specific place. That's the trust foundation. Because if I tell you right now that I have a Ruby, you'll be like, okay, because you tell me. So don't believe the issuer. believe the third party. That's going to bring you the trust. So it gets tokenized. And then what we want to play here with Chainlink, with this actually, is the USDC play. We want to onboard the asset on Ethereum, and then we want to start seeing if we can play that the dividends or the interest that is being brought through the tokenization of the Ruby gets paid in a gasless, right now, ecosystem, which for us, we understand is base. So how does the future look like? If we are able to, something that is so natural as a mineral, or I don't know if it's a mineral, right? A ruby, I'm sorry about that. But let's say a jewel. If that's like the most natural thing because the earth bought it, that will never be digitized. But now through technology and everything, we go into something so natural, into a digital ecosystem, across chains, and that means if we are able to develop things like this, that means that everything can be tokenized. And myself, I do believe that the world is going to be tokenized. It's not because we want to go digital. It's always about efficiency and optimization. And doing transactions on chain, just because everything is verifiable, it makes it more cost efficient. You want to have the reclamation processes, you want to have the payment outs and everything just in a matter of clicks. And because if you onboard all of these assets, then you have people with digital assets in their wallets, and maybe they can go play around with DeFi. Imagine if you own, let's say, half of that Ruby. For you to get a collateralization with the bank, the procedure is super hefty. Like, it's a whole pain. But if you bring trust to that is actually digitized, if you bring it on chain, and the person that owns the asset, or a couple of tokens from the asset, or whatever it is, then maybe he can go and play in the markets, because the value, it's already started, and then you create your own collateralization. So I do believe the blockchain is the decentralization, because banks, I've been dealing with them, and it's always a pain to understand how to get a grant or how to do that. I have a house, give me a mortgage on top of that. But here, now, you become your own player. You can become your own bank, and that's the beauty of it, right? That's why we're building this, because it has to happen that no longer we need to rely on intermediaries, but we have the control of our full assets, of our full value. And for us, if we see that future, it's all about talking across blockchains. No more I am an Ethereum believer, or I am a BSC, or whatever. It's all about I don't care. I just want to digitize an asset. I just want to go into the markets. I just want to get my own investors. I want to get my own play. We are going back into becoming our own decision makers. And I believe that's the future. And hopefully I am right, because then it will be a beautiful future, right? So thank you very much for this brief presentation. Hopefully you guys understand the value of tokenization. And if not, I'm always happy to have a coffee to talk about how the tokenization state looks like. So thank you very much. My name is Edwin, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Bricken.